Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my channel. It seems like it's been a little while since I've done any of the recordings. So I thought I'd come back and talk a little bit about March because it's an interesting month for us all. Let me share my screen here so we can take an actual look as to what the vibration of March actually looks like. You can see that in the sky right now. I'm doing this on the 1st of March. You can see that there's a lot of water directly going on into the chart. And that brings up emotions. That brings up a ton of emotions. We've just had Mars let go. Mars had been retrograding since the 6th of December, 2024, so a few months ago. And Mars just let go on the very later part there of February. So it's not surprising we had that whole big outburst that happened in the Oval Office. And I often say that, Mars releasing its built up anger, whether provoked or not, it doesn't matter. Whether Mars was necessary to be provoked or not, it doesn't matter. Mars doesn't care. Mars takes that aggressive energy and just really internalizes it, especially in the sign of Cancer. It just has a tendency to hit us right into the gut area in mundane astrology. World astrology. Cancer is all about the finances of the world. It's about the products of the world. So again, we've got these conversations going on about tariffs. That's not surprising at all with Mars in that sign of Cancer. And the other thing that's happening right now, and right on up until very early April, we've got Mars is out of bounds. So there's no boundary lines. It's just like people getting up on a bit of a crappy kind of a day, a little bit of crappy type of an attitude to them. And especially in your own personal chart, if you are somebody and in your own personal chart, your Mars is in Aries or your personal Mars is in Scorpio, it means that your Mars in your chart is very, very, very strong, which means when anything is going on with Mars up here in the sky, then it really affects you as an individual. Or if you perhaps were also born with an out of bounds Mars. So this Mars, even though Mars has been in astrology, what we call in its fall, I was just teaching about that the other night in class, that Mars is not very strong in Cancer. As a rule, Mars is exalted in the sign across from Cancer, which is Capricorn. Mars loves to be in Capricorn, so it's exalted there. But we say it's in its fall when it's in the sign across. So generally, Mars is not overly strong in Cancer, but as with anything, when you build it up and build it up and build it up and build it up, and then kaboom, when it releases and lets go. And being in a water sign as it is, it's pulling in a lot of the other signs that are also in water. You are yourself somebody with a lot of water directly in your chart, then you're going to be really affected. Then when we get to the 2nd of March, we've now got Venus is going to start to retrograde. Venus doesn't particularly like to be in Aries either. Venus, as a matter of fact, is in her detriment. Venus rules Libra, which is a sign across. So Venus is not that happy being in Aries, and then we're going to get a retrograde. Now, one of the things you can see, so this is the sun, and this is Mercury, and this is Venus. And the sun and Mercury and Venus all sort of combine together. They are three of the closer planets that sit together. And it's almost, you almost get a bit of a vision that when they get too far away from the sun, it always reminds me like the sun sends out a bit of a lasso and kind of pulls them in closer to her. So the sun is doing that with Venus going to retrograde. And then a little further on the 15th, we're going to have Mercury is going to get retro. It's going to go into retrograde. So once again, the sun will send out a bit of a lasso and pull Mercury in. And what we're going to see throughout the whole month of March is that Venus and Mercury retrograde are going to intertwine around each other. So that's why I've talked about this video that March is a really big month of decision making. We will look at things from all different avenues in March. Venus retrograde will have us questioning, do I like it? Do I not like it? Does it make me happy? Am I happy doing it that way? Would I rather be somewhere else? Is there a different place that I would be happier? And those are the decision processes that we will be working our way through in March. Now, is it a good month to make, like sign on the dotted line, the physical, this is the decision? No, it's not, because Venus doesn't turn direct until the middle part of April. So you won't know. You won't have that definite decision. So I'm asking all of you, allow is the word. Allow yourself to be flexible. Allow yourself to change your mind. Allow yourself to look at things through different avenues, because Venus starts out in Aries where she's not overly strong, but Venus is going to retrograde back into the sign of Pisces, where she went through much earlier this year. Venus went through the sign of Pisces. We're going to have some of those same questions that through later part of January, coming into February, when Venus was going through there. Venus is going to go back to rehab some of that conversation to see, maybe the first idea wasn't really my greatest idea. So allow yourself to hold that flexibility. And if you have decisions to make, that you have the option to be able to wait until the ending part of April to finalize that plan, then do so. Do yourself a big favor and allow yourself to do that. On the 2nd of March, of course, Mercury is still in Pisces. Mercury is going to slip into Aries within the next day on the 3rd. Mercury will have slipped into the sign of Aries now. So both Mercury and Venus are in the sign of Aries. This is really going to also affect our friends who are born around that later part of March, coming into that early part of April. Our conversations, our communication, Mercury is our planet of communication. Our communication changes when we have Mercury slide into a different sign, into Aries. It will take us from more forward thinking. Now, Mars is the planet that rules the sign of Gemini. Sorry, not Gemini, Aries. So Mars will actually have a bit of an aggressive kind of a conversation going on there with Mercury, saying, okay, this was the decision process last spring, but what appears to not be working right now, so that we actually want to make our way forward in order to make those changes come into play. We then make our way through, and we see on the 4th of March, we see Uranus and the moon line up together. Uranus and the moon in Taurus. It's all about the money markets and the financial decisions and how those financial decisions, this I'm sure is when the banking industry will also start to make some other decisions um, moving their way forward. We've got Jupiter. Jupiter has moved into Gemini. So our Gemini friends are feeling like things are moving for them. Things are moving forward. They may have felt that they had stalled a bit from October to early February, but now we've got Jupiter getting a bit of that mojo on and making some movement in Jupiter's way forward. We want to see as we make our way forward, there's lots of conversation around that 5th and 6th of March. We haven't got to the Mercury retrograde yet, because remember, the Mercury retrograde starts on the 15th. So here's what I'm going to suggest for everybody around that 5th, 6th, 7th of March. Do all your computer backups, all of your computer backups. Put things on USB sticks. Do yourself a favor. Doesn't mean to say that your computer system is going to go kaboom or anything when Mercury retrogrades, but let's be prepared. Let's not be dumb about this. Let's get in the preparatory stage in order to make sure that we're all going to be okay when Mercury does start to retrograde. This is the 7th. We come to the 8th. Now, when we come to the 8th of Mars, the moon will come down, 8th of March, sorry. The moon will have come down to line up with Mars. So the moon and Mars are having a very, maybe not so great kind of a conversation. There is a very emotional conversation that takes place because we're in the middle of a grand trine. I can draw a line from this Mars and Mercury, Mars and the moon. I can draw a line over to the asteroid goddess Vesta, the keeper of the gate, and up to the sun. So we're in the middle of a grand trine. We're stuck in that emotional conversation about who actually is the keeper of the gate. Who is the king? Who is the person who rules this situation? And so the emotions are running very high because the moon is being connected with Mars, and Mars is ruling that keeper of the gate. So some of the conversations that actually took place in February are going to come up to reignite itself around this 8th, 9th of March. It's always fun to watch planetary wise what's going on, because then we get to the 10th and the moon is then opposing Pluto. Pluto is saying, we're excavating here. You know, I've heard people talk about world orders being changed. That's correct. It's been being changed for the last 2.5 years. As soon as Pluto directly went into the sign of Aquarius, it actually started to change world order, because that's what Pluto does. It creates change, it creates the shifting. So there's some very emotional conversation that is being had here about that full entire change. Because then we're going to come to the 15th of March. And let me move this back a little bit. We're into the middle of a lunar eclipse happening on the 14th of March. The lunar eclipse is at 22:23 degrees Virgo. Lunar eclipses are very much about the shutting down of the old, the finishes of the old, and the beginning of the new. So I suspect this 14th of March, there is a huge discussion that is absolutely going on here connected around tariffs, which we have been expecting and talking about. Because that moon is in the sign of Virgo. Virgo has to do with the agricultural fields. It has to do with it. It's an earth sign, so it has to do with the agriculture. It has to do with crops. It has to do with transportation. There is a huge discussion with that lunar eclipse. Lunar eclipse, again, is about shutting down of the old in order to create the new. We do see that Uranus, the planet of unexpected events, is also connected directly with this eclipse. So I suspect that Uranus creates an event. Uranus is in the sign of Taurus. Taurus is the financial industry. And Uranus in Taurus is going to be discussing very much about financial losses or financial gains or how to work directly with the finances of things that are happening. We also see that Neptune by now has made it to 29 degrees Pisces. Neptune in Pisces, Neptune's been in Pisces for 17 years. And for those of you who've had readings with me recently, you'll hear me talk about I'm so over Neptune and Pisces. Neptune and Pisces is all about our fentanyl trade, our drugs, our alcohol, our addictions. And we're going to see Neptune come out of Pisces and we'll go into the sign of Aries, where I'm hoping we'll find a great big connection to a much larger solution to how to fix any of those situations. By now, we also have seen Venus has backed back, because remember when we saw Venus start to retrograde, she was all the way up to 10 degrees Aries. She's moving backwards. She's at 7 degrees Aries. So she's having a conversation with Mercury. Mercury, the planet of communication, about how do we want to move forward, Mercury? How do we want to make that forward motion? Of course, in Aries. Well, then we get to the 15th, we get to the next day. Oops, I'm not at the day, I'm at the hour. The next day. And we start to see that Mercury is now in retrograde. So Mercury, instead of giving the answer to Venus, Mercury will actually say, let me think about it. Retrograding planets says Venus and Mercury are going to work together throughout this journey. And Venus and Mercury are both going to say, let's think about it. Let's give it some thought. Let's put some thoughts in motion. Maybe we can get Mars on board here. Mars is out of bounds, so Mars seems to be seeing things from a very much wider spectrum. Let's get Mars on board here to see if Mars can give us some options. What are some options here? So again, I come back, even if we're talking about tariffs or we're talking about healthcare or we're talking about our police situation. Let's have a whole big full discussion here about what it is that we can solve. And all of you will be finding this, no matter what your astrological sign is. You also will be having those internal discussions. Where do you want to go from here? And you'll start to hear people. Where do we want to go from here? What's our next step, Aries? What's our next step? Where are we going? What is our pavement that is happening in front of us? And as long as Venus and Mercury are retrograding, the planning is taking place. So if you think for one moment you're not making a lot of those decisions internally, I'm here to say you are. You absolutely are making a lot of those internal decisions. Now, those of you who like to work, make the decision, make it happen, boom, 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 boom. Good luck with that. May the force be with you, my friends. It's not going to work that easy, and it's not going to work that fast. And we have to recognize that there's a whole big, huge situation that is happening on the world stage that is way bigger than you and I. As much as we'd like to think we have full control, but there's a whole bigger stage that's happening. There's a whole bigger movement, readjusting, reshifting, rechanging. And always remember, when we've got planets like this retrograding planet says it's time for us to do the things, re-look, rethink, research, recheck, recreate, re-ask. And as I said back at the beginning, one of the things is the sun has sent out her lasso to lasso. It's like misbehaving children. Lasso these two planets and pull them back towards her. So finding a place where we can all massively shine is the whole reason for this. As we then move our way along, we get to the 20. Now we've got, this is an interesting day, the 20th of March. Mark your calendar. This is a very interesting day because in astrology, 29 degrees is what we call a karmic degree. And it's called a critical degree. And 29 degrees, we've got Neptune sitting in the heart of the sun. That's a lovely vibration. And so I invite all of you to write on your calendar that day, on the 20th of March, to make it a day to do something that is very creative for you to do. Something that is lovely, something that gives you inner pleasure, something that makes your internal sides to you happy, because that is a happy day with Neptune in the heart of the sun. So we say Neptune is Cazimi here. It's a lovely day. Then we get to the 21st of March. Well, that's the spring solstice. And the spring solstice is also always when the sun moves into the sign of Aries. The sun moving into the sign of Aries is always the spring solstice. So this year it's on the 21st of March, and we're also saying happy birthday to our Aries friends for the next 30-ish days. And that's a lovely alignment. That is the heralding in of spring. It's called the Aries bloom point as well. And there are a lot of astrologers who believe that this is really the day of astrology when our actual calendar starts at the beginning of a cardinal planet. As we move our way along, Venus and Mercury are now coming back. And one of the things we're going to see is right now we've got Mercury and Venus and the sun. And what we're going to see is, so this would be our sun, we're actually going to see Venus come back behind the sun and Mercury back behind the sun. And what that's going to do right now, as I'm doing this on the 1st of March, right now, Venus is an evening star. Every 2 years, Venus shifts and changes and goes from an evening star to a morning star. And that changes vibrations entirely. Ariel Gutman wrote a book called The Venus Star Point, and it's a very, very wonderful book, astrology book. It's all about Venus and how she makes a five-pointed star, really, by doing this kind of an alignment. I won't spend a lot of my time talking here, but also in your own personal chart. You know, you're going to want to see, are you a Venus morning star person? Are you a Venus evening star person? Because when the matching Venus then up in the sky, let's say you're a Venus morning star person, then when Venus becomes that morning star person, that's an important time for you. As I said, we're going to see like the sun is going to pull that Venus and Mercury closer to her. Okay. You can see now on the 23rd of March, we've got the sun and Venus. So we say Venus is cazimi. Venus is sitting right in the heart of the sun. And that expounds Venus. Anything that sits in the heart of the sun, we massively feel it. So again, we still got a Venus retrograde going on until April. But in that particular day, on that particular day, we'll make a lot of those Venus decisions big time because she's sitting right in the heart of that sun. And then when we get to the 25th of March, then we've got Mercury sitting right into the heart of the sun. So now communication shifts and changes. Now our discussions, things on how we are looking at life, how we are communicating with all of this prospect. And now you can see the sun has moved past Mercury and Venus. So now they've become morning stars versus how they've been all the way through. When we get to the 26th, that's sort of our last day that Venus is going to be in Aries, because when we get to the 28th, Venus has now moved into Pisces, and she's lined up with Neptune. So there is so much discussion and discovery of what it is that we truly do love. And even thinking about some of the people, who are some of the people that we truly, absolutely love. As I said, March is a big month of decisions. Nope, we don't want to make the finality of the decision, but there is so much processing going on in the month of March. When we do the recording for April, I'll talk a lot about the last 2 weeks of April, all of the final decisions that really had been culminating and had been actually being made through March. We just may not have been recognizing that we're actually doing all of those things. And as we, this is the last day for Mercury to be in Aries. Venus will be intertwining on this 29th of March. You can see Venus is at 28 degrees, North Node is at 27 degrees, Mercury. And so I always talk about planets as if they're sort of sitting in a chair together at a lovely party together, having some conversations. And Neptune is asking, if we were to dream, Neptune and Pisces is about the dreamer, is about the dreaming of coming up with some types of solutions. Venus is going, how would I like to handle it? Well, I could do it this way. I could do it that way. I could make a lot of those decisions. And North Node in between is simply saying, what brings you closest to your authentic self? And that's what I want everybody to take note of around that 29th of March. What brings you closest to your authentic self? Because that's going to be important to question and to ask constantly throughout all of this. What would make me happiest doing? Not what Tom, Dick, Harry, Sally, George, Helen tells me that I would be happiest doing. Come back to our center. Come back to our internal center. What would I be happiest doing? And allow yourself, Neptune is the dreamer. So allow that dreaminess to come into play. And when we get to the 31st of March, Neptune comes out of Pisces. I can't wait for that day on the world stage because people are going to go, what just happened? Because now Neptune has not been in Aries in any of our lifetimes. Neptune's not been in Aries in 165 years. So now we're going to start to get a bit of a glimpse. When astrologers talk about, we haven't seen these alignments in 12,000 years, they're talking about all of the outer planets all going in at the one time. And remember, when Pluto, that planet of endings and shiftings and changings of world order, that's all planetary driven. It's hugely planetary driven. And yes, one of the things we want is for Neptune to come out of Pisces and go into Aries. And yes, we want Saturn to come out of Pisces and go into Aries. Let's come out of a bit of that watery, emotional self where sometimes we have a tendency to perhaps drown a bit. And let's get a bit of that fire set under our behinds to get us moving, get us rolling, get us shifting, get us changing. Let's work on that. March is an introductory month. It's going to be an interesting month for each and every one of us. Write in the comments below where you hope to go with that month of March. It will offer a ton of possibilities. Will you step up to that plate? I'll see you in April.